Hi guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I do hope that you're having a fantastic day wherever it is that you are and whatever time it is that you get to watch this podcast. If this podcast is good for you, please remember to subscribe, to like, to comment, and most importantly, to share it with someone else. So welcome to the book of Deuteronomy. I know I have said that so many times, but honestly, today, we are going to actually start the book of Deuteronomy. So as I mentioned, that the first 3 chapters of the book of Deuteronomy are just basically recaps of the things that happened as the Israelites journeyed from Egypt all the way to where they are at, which is the plains of Moab. So because of this reason, I will not be reading the text from the Bible like word for word, but rather I'll be summarizing it and then sharing my takeouts. So let's do this. Right, so Deuteronomy chapter 1 was written from the point of view of Moses. I feel like it's really important that I say that because there's his point of view and sometimes point of God does not necessarily align. Sometimes it's just like, Moses' point of view is not necessarily the truth. And you'll see that in chapter 3. And I'm not discounting Moses. You're going to see that happen in chapter 3. So it was written from the point of view of Moses, and as a faithful leader of the Israelites, Moses stood on top of Mount Horeb. I feel like Horeb should be Herob. I don't know why, I just feel like Herob is easier to say than Horeb. I don't know. But yeah, and he stood on top of Mount Horeb and addressed his followers. He wanted to provide them with a status report, like maybe a status report of how far this quest has gone, this quest of the promised land, like how far are these guys. So Moses starts by expressing to the people that their faith had brought them this far and that they shouldn't turn their backs on God at this point. The Israelites were now on the verge of the promised land. They were almost ready to receive the blessing of the Lord, which was a blessing of the promised land. So Moses told them to be patient because even as they were getting ready to occupy this land, it was already occupied by the Canaanites and the Amorites. So there was a lot of fighting that was going to happen before they could actually occupy the land. So Moses started by recounting how as a leader, he couldn't take care of everyone and solve all their problems and all their arguments by himself. So what he did is he chose some men from each tribe and made them into leaders over the Israelites. So there was a leader in charge of 10 people, there was a leader in charge of 50 people, a leader in charge of 100 people, and a leader in charge of 1,000 people. You guys, I don't know whether you remember where that happened. That happened someplace in Exodus where Jethro, who was Moses' father-in-law, came to visit Moses. It was like, dude, you are overwhelmed. You can't now be the judge of everybody here. Choose some leaders, delegate some of these roles. And that is what Moses is recapping. So Moses then continues to recount how he again chose a leader from each tribe, totaling to 12 leaders, and he sent them to go ahead of the army to spy on the Amorites and the Canaanites. And 10 of the spies came back and complained that the armies were much bigger than the Israelites, which was true, and they would not have been able to defeat them. Which is again is true if you're looking with your physical eyes, or if you're doing it without God's help. Of course, they wouldn't be able to defeat them if they were doing it without God's help. They even say that they saw giants in the land. This scared the other Israelites, and they decided they did not want to try to enter the promised land after all. So by doing this, the Israelites really angered God, and they grew fearful of taking the land that the Lord had promised them, and instead they wanted to actually appoint a new leader and go back to Egypt. But God commended Joshua and Caleb because they did exactly what God had told them. They told the people that if they trusted God, they could have actually been able to defeat the Amorites and the Canaanites and enter the promised land at that point. So God said that he would give Caleb and Joshua the land that they walked on, which is a promised land, because of their obedience and faith. I like that. That is obedience and faith. It's obedience and trust. Trust and obey. I like that those 2 words really simplify the things that God requires of us, to trust and to obey. Simple, just like that. So as a result, Sorry, I've lost I've lost what I said. So God said that he would give Caleb and Joshua the land that they had walked on because of their obedience and their faith. And the lack of faith among the rest of the people caused God to not allow them to get into the promised land. After some time, as Moses is reminding them, the guys were like, okay, fine, now we want to enter the promised land. And they tried to take the promised land themselves by doing it by their own ways. And as a result, God told Moses that he would not be there to protect them because they disobeyed him and lost their faith in God. And as we all know, they lost that battle miserably. And that's the end of the summary of chapter 1 of Deuteronomy. So this chapter reminds me of a conversation that I was having last week with a friend of mine. And I was telling him how, as an interior designer, I have really limited myself to doing residential spaces. Like I only do homes. As a matter of fact, probably apartments. Like I've really limited. Nimejiweka kwa box, nikajiweka kwa even tinier box. Like now, even in the residential homes that I usually furnish, most of the residential places I furnish are actually furnished apartments. That means that designing them or decorating them is much easier because I'm not decorating for some specific family. You see, when you're decorating for a specific family, you have to think about their likes, their dislikes, the functions of the family, how big the family is, and then you have to incorporate all those things in those designs. So it's a little bit more harder as opposed to when you're designing a furnished apartment and you're designing for the masses. So you're designing for anybody. Anybody can come and take up the place. So you're not necessarily incorporating people's likes in that. So this limiting of myself, how I've limited myself, has meant that every time I get a project that is not a residential place, it can be a barber shop or a spa or a salon, it can be a hotel lounge, it can be a bakery, it can be a high-end grocery store. I have passed on those projects to people who I thought were more deserving or people who I thought were more qualified than myself. Like I just consider them more qualified than I am, which is really the Israelites' way of life. Because God said it was time for the Israelites to enter the promised land, but what did they do? They were just like, no, let's go back to Egypt. We will not be able to defeat this giant. Like they allowed their fears of failure and fear of the giants or fear of the unknown or whatever it is, fear, they allowed it to overwhelm them and they allowed it to take control of even the decisions that they made. So how many opportunities have you passed on to someone else? Or how many opportunities have passed you by because you are too afraid to fail? You are afraid that if you started that business, it will fail. You are afraid that if you take up that promotion, you will not be able to deliver. You are afraid that even if you became like if you got married, you will not be able to be a wife. Like people actually get afraid of even roles and they're just like, wow, I don't think I can do that. And so in doing that, in getting afraid, they actually sabotage themselves. So how many times have you lost an opportunity because you are too afraid? I want to just ask us if we could actually challenge ourselves to always take up every opportunity that God presents to us. And not just take it blindly, but take up with the faith and the trust that because God is the one who has presented it, that we can take it up, because if He is the one that has presented it, He said that He will be there with us, He will protect us, He will guide us, He will show us the way to go, and even He says that He will show us how to profit. As in, God is like your business mentor. Like He will show you, this is how you do this to make a profit. This is how you do this so that you can get plenty. This is how you do this. As in, God will actually train us. I challenge you, and I even challenge myself, because man, I have really let fear take over in some areas of my life. So I challenge you and I challenge myself to walk boldly into the spaces that God places you in. Take up that role boldly. Start that business boldly. And even to myself, do the podcast boldly, because sometimes, man, this podcast can be hard to do, but yes, that I will do them boldly, and I'm challenging myself to do them boldly, because God said He was right here with us, that He's going to lead us, that He's going to show us the way, He's going to protect us, He's going to keep us, He's going to sustain us. These are all the promises that He has made. And even so, that He's going to teach us how to profit. This is your girl, Wakeji Kamore, and this has been Reflections by Wakeji Kamore.